rest of your life. 800-257-1257. Toll free. Call Garden State Life Insurance for your free information today. 257-1257.
This is CNN.
Hello, I'm Natalie Allen in Washington. CNN World Report is coming right up, but first, these top stories on CNN Weekend. While Bill Clinton has gained a few points in our latest tracking poll, he's lost something too, his voice. Clinton campaigned this morning at a pregame tailgate party near Riverfront Stadium in Cincinnati. He turned the microphone over to his wife Hillary after briefly addressing the crowd.
Bad, huh? It's bad. I'm going to let Hillary say something. But I want you to remember, we fought for a year. We've got 2 days to go. My voice will be better by this afternoon, and I'll be there Monday. I'll be there Tuesday. Fight on. Don't give up. Go!
In our latest CNN USA Today Gallup tracking poll among likely voters, Clinton has 43% and Bush 36%. Perot trails by 15%. A poll of registered voters shows Clinton with a 9-point lead. That's anticipating all registered voters will go to the polls. That is, though, unlikely. President Bush continues his rigorous campaigning down to the wire, stepping up his attacks on Bill Clinton's character. This time, it is the Democratic ticket's environmental platform.
Governor Clinton and the Ozone Man. Well, here's what they want to do. They're backing off a little now because they're on all sides of every issue. They want to go and put a 40 to 45 mile per gallon CAFE standard, fuel efficiency standard, on American autos, and that will throw auto workers out of work. And I'm not going to go to the extreme. We are not going to go to the extreme on this environment.
President Bush ends the day with campaign stops in Stratford, Connecticut and Short Hills, New Jersey. Bill Clinton is heading to New Jersey by way of Pennsylvania. Ross Perot is campaigning in California. We turn now to Angola, where the situation is worsening there. Government troops and rebel forces are fighting a fierce battle in the capital, Luanda, raising prospects of a return to all-out civil war. A Portuguese news agency says more than 200 people have died since yesterday. Bloodshed continues across Turkey's border in northern Iraq, where government troops are continuing their campaign against separatist Kurdish forces. Turkish TV reports at least 1,000 Kurds were killed when Turkish forces overran a major rebel base. The Kurds are seeking an independent state in southeast Turkey and use northern Iraq as a sanctuary. CNN World Report is coming up right after this.
Let's see what Kevin left us this time.
You mean what he didn't leave us?
Hey guys, thanks for watching the place again. Sorry there's no food, but the Celica's in the garage.
We need eggs.
Definitely eggs.
We gotta have orange juice.
Freshly squeezed orange juice. Why don't we get some bacon?
Make that Canadian bacon.
The Toyota Celica. Bringing home the bacon has never been so much fun.
Teddy bear, turn around. Teddy bear, touch the ground.
The airbag,
Teddy bear,
the safety belt, anti-lock brakes. At Liberty Mutual, we've conducted our own safety research on cars to reduce injuries and reduce insurance costs. Any alternative would be just too costly.
Every day, millions of people plan this way. Is it any wonder they're running out of time? Take a look at Quo Vadis, the world leader in agenda planning diaries. The simplest way to juggle all your commitments and why it's the only diary sold in over 40 countries and 10 languages. With different sections for your activities and unique to Quo Vadis, your special notes here. Phone, fax, write, see and do. Quo Vadis, designed for everyone. Made in the USA, available at office suppliers and stationers everywhere.
Today, weeks ago, his critics had written him off, but a sudden surge has Bush gaining ground. Can the Republican momentum continue before time runs out? President George Bush, the guest on Newsmaker Sunday, today, 5:30 p.m. Eastern on CNN.
I'll be back at the half hour with more news. Ralph Wenge and Ralitsa Vassileva are next with CNN World Report. They take a look at what lies ahead for thousands of Cambodian refugees returning home after years of exile.
It is a time for coming home for the refugees of Cambodia's killing fields. And it is a time for going to school for the hundreds of children who are refugees of Yugoslavia's bloodshed. But it is still a time of watching and waiting for the refugees caught in the division of the island of Cyprus.
Welcome to CNN World Report, where we bring you the news as reported by the world's broadcasters from their perspectives. I'm Ralitsa Vassileva.
And I'm Ralph Wenge. The fate of thousands of Cambodians hoping to return to their homeland is in question as international peace efforts appear to falter. This week, negotiators from Thailand and Japan failed to persuade Khmer Rouge guerrillas to comply with the terms of a United Nations brokered peace accord. The Khmer Rouge killed more than 1 million Cambodians during its reign of terror in the 1970s, and in recent days, the rebels have been accused of staging new attacks on ethnic villages outside Phnom Penh. The UN has threatened to exclude the Khmer Rouge from planned elections next year unless it rejoins the peace process by November 15th. But as UN TV reports, a touching homecoming awaits many who make it back to Cambodia.
Prum Sek is home at last. After 13 years of exile in Thailand, he's returned to Cambodia, reuniting with the family he thought he'd never see again.
I'm so happy to be home. I met my nieces, nephews, and grandchildren. Everybody.
Reunions like this are taking place throughout the country as a massive United Nations repatriation program bears fruit. By train, truck and air, some 150,000 Cambodians have already returned to the land of their ancestors. The UN has more than 20,000 soldiers, police and civilians in Cambodia. The peace plan calls for internationally monitored elections next year. Over 50,000 soldiers from 3 of the 4 Cambodian factions have laid down their arms. But the party of Democratic Kampuchea, the Khmer Rouge, has so far refused to participate. The Security Council has expressed serious concern. Negotiations continue to resolve the impasse. Meanwhile, the flow of returnees from Thailand is reaching 40,000 a month. UN agencies are helping the former refugees with financial help to buy land to start farming again. Alternatively, cash grants are made available for those needing different kinds of assistance.
With this money, they can decide themselves what to do. Build a house, start a little business, perhaps launch themselves in the private sector.
A publicity campaign is alerting the population, especially returnees, to the dangers of landmines. To speed up the painstaking job of removing this hazard, the United Nations runs month-long mine-clearing courses in 11 regions. It's expected that nearly 400,000 refugees will have returned home by the time of the elections. After exile in camps in Thailand, the tears of these returnees are tears of joy. With UN Television, this is Steve Whitehouse for CNN World Report.
Children often pay the highest price for wars started by adults. Many are left homeless and orphaned. Thousands of the young victims of the war in Bosnia-Herzegovina now scramble for a new life in nearby Slovenia. And as Slovenian TV reports, the children arrive to find a struggling new republic opening its doors.
There are 25,000 children among the refugees. Most of them arrived in Slovenia in May and will stay for the winter, which has already begun. The number of refugee children equals the number of one whole generation of Slovene children attending elementary school. However, Slovenia is trying to help those from Bosnia who still remember blood, the dead, the last sight of a father or brother. Some kind of teaching activities have now been organized in the refugee centers. In October, school started in 29 refugee centers and in a number of schools all over Slovenia. The children have a 3-hour course every day. The teaching programs for the mother tongue, mathematics and foreign language are complete, but others are reduced. The teachers are mostly volunteers. These are the children of the first and the second class. They long for their homes. But when they come to school, they feel as if they were in their own school, back home.
The teachers themselves are temporary refugees in Slovenia, or students who study in Slovene universities, but come from southern republics. Among them, there are also highly educated people, citizens of Slovenia whose origins are in Croatia or Bosnia and Herzegovina.
So in addition to food and shelter, school has been organized for the refugee children. Slovenia asked several foreign countries as well as the United Nations for supporting this. So far, the Islamic Humanitarian Organization has provided most of the support for the schooling program. 1/3 of all 58 refugee centers are abandoned barracks of the former Yugoslav army. The rooms are old, damp and cold, without heating facilities. The renovation of refugee centers is being financially supported by the United Nations High Commission for Refugees, the Italian government, Sweden, Germany, the Italian town of Bologna, Switzerland and Austria. During the last year, Slovenia has used up all reserves. Some of the refugees have been in Slovenia for 7 months. Life in the refugee centers, foreign surroundings and the war only intensify uncertainty and doubt.
Malia Jelen-Mikša, Television Slovenia, reporting specially for the CNN World Report.
Thousands displaced by the Turkish invasion of Cyprus in 1974 were the focus of talks this week aimed at reuniting the divided island. There was no immediate word on the progress of the meeting at the United Nations between Cypriot President George Vassileva and Turkish leader Rauf Denktaş. During earlier talks, Denktaş reportedly agreed in principle to the rights of Greek Cypriots to reclaim their land. Cyprus's CYBC has this perspective.
The United Nations High Commission for Refugees calls them displaced persons. They call themselves refugees in their own country. They are the 200,000 Greek Cypriots who fled their homes when the Turkish army invaded and occupied the north of the island in the summer of 1974. They represent 2 out of 5 of the population. Turkey, a guarantor power under the 1960 London-Zurich agreements that gave Cyprus her independence, invaded on the pretext of protecting the 18% Turkish Cypriot community, after a coup against the government of Archbishop Makarios, staged by the military junta then ruling Greece. The coup was abortive. Archbishop Makarios returned to the presidential palace and the Athens junta fell. But far from leaving, when constitutional order was restored, the Turkish army stayed and continues 18 years later to occupy almost 40% of the island and well over half its coastline. Meanwhile, as many as 80,000 settlers from the Turkish mainland have been encouraged to colonize the north and are now living in Greek Cypriot houses, working Greek Cypriot land. Some refugees have managed to re-establish themselves in the south. Many have been housed on government estates. But more damaging than material loss is the psychological trauma of people whose lives have been shattered. Cut off so suddenly from their land, few have been able to overcome the sense of disorientation. In 1976, the European Commission of Human Rights found Turkey responsible for the eviction of Greek Cypriot refugees, refusal to allow their return, and the looting and deprivation of their possessions. Since then, the UN General Assembly, the Security Council, and the UN Commission on Human Rights, as well as the non-aligned movement, the Commonwealth, the European Parliament, and the Council of Europe, have all demanded the urgent return of Cyprus's refugees. Turkey has ignored them all. As President George Vassileva and Turkish Cypriot leader Rauf Denktaş negotiate under UN auspices for a settlement to reunify Cyprus, the refugees wait and watch, incredulous that it's land and property to which they hold title deeds that's being used by the Turkish side as bargaining chips for a better deal on a new federal constitution. Vivian Ladamatu for CNN World Report, Nicosia.
And coming up on CNN World Report, as Salvadorans try to bury their war-torn past, reminders of that violent era are unearthed. Peace is put on hold in South Africa following a new surge in factional fighting. And the jewel of South America may be losing some of its sparkle as a new crime wave hits the beaches.
Goodbye, old Regal. Hello, new Regal. The 1993 Buick Regal sedan. This story isn't unusual. There's a real love affair between Buick owners and their automobiles. And the latest J.D. Power & Associates initial quality study ranks Regal sedan as the best car in its price class. The great American love story belongs to Buick.
Introducing a new Chex that's double delicious. I love double Chex. Better than the rest. Corn, rice, sweet, crunch, double crisp, bite, munch. It's new, lightly sweetened corn plus lightly sweetened rice makes new double Chex twice as nice. I love double Chex. Better than the rest. Corn, rice, sweet, crunch, double crisp, bite, munch.
Other laser printers have been playing leapfrog for years in a futile effort to catch up with the HP LaserJet. Now they're truly up against it. Hewlett-Packard introduces the HP LaserJet 4, a new generation, a new standard to reach for. Good luck, fellas. If it isn't a LaserJet, it's only a laser printer.
Bill Clinton's economic plan, endorsed by over 600 economists, including 10 Nobel Prize winners, as the best hope for reviving the nation's economy. More than 400 of America's most respected business leaders say the Clinton plan will create jobs. A panel of independent experts convened by Time magazine concludes that Clinton's plan has the best solutions to our economic problems. And now even the author of Ross Perot's plan has endorsed Bill Clinton for president. Let's get our economy moving again.
The United Nations, aiming to save troubled peace talks in El Salvador, is giving rebel forces 45 more days to fully disarm. Key issues, including government reforms, remain unresolved. And as TCS News reports, there are also human rights concerns, heightened by the grim discovery in northern El Salvador last month of the Civil War's worst massacre.
This skeleton of a young child is evidence of the largest single massacre in El Salvador's 12-year civil war. This team of forensic experts discovered the remains of more than 60 people, mostly pregnant women and children, buried beneath the ruins of a church in the remote village of El Mozote. This finding confirms survivors' claims of a slaughter 11 years ago, when soldiers swept through El Mozote and surrounding villages. During a 3-day rampage in December 1981, soldiers tortured and killed more than 800 peasants, believed to be sympathizers of the FNL guerrillas. These scientists expect to find more remains buried under 7 nearby sites. Their tedious task could last a year. From here, the bones will be shipped to a laboratory where samples will undergo genetic analysis. Experts hope to match DNA samples to survivors, giving them a chance to identify and bury those they lost. And this evidence may also be used in criminal cases against those believed to be responsible for the massacre, members of the Atlacat Battalion. This is Norma Jimenez with TCS News for the CNN World Report.
In South Africa Saturday, thousands of Zulu supporters marched through the streets of Durban in Natal Province, the site of the latest spate of factional fighting. There was no violence during the march, which was organized by the Zulu-dominated Inkatha Freedom Party. And earlier in the day, Inkatha leader Mangosuthu Buthelezi called for a meeting with African National Congress President Nelson Mandela. As SABC reports, a truce between the ANC and Inkatha could help bring peace to the troubled country.
Is this the scene that will stop South Africa from descending once again into a spiral of violence? In January last year, Nelson Mandela and Mangosuthu Buthelezi embraced in a public show of reconciliation. It proved to be a futile attempt, at resolving the long-standing feud between their followers. The bloodshed continued amid efforts to get the CODESA negotiations off the ground. In June, Boipatong shattered the peace in South Africa and very nearly wrecked the fragile negotiation process. After months of uncertainty and suspicion, South African leaders moved tentatively back towards the negotiating table. And just a few weeks ago, President de Klerk and Nelson Mandela succeeded at a much-publicized summit in getting the constitutional talks back on track. This week, the whole of Natal province was weeping as first one and then another act of political barbarism shocked an already battered community. For Wenge, with its 32 corpses, seems destined to join Boipatong in the long list of South African atrocities. And as if that wasn't enough for 1 week, ANC regional leader Reggie Radebe was gunned down in cold blood. The incidents are revenge attacks, part of a trend that has kept this part of South Africa at war with itself for the best part of 10 years. At leadership level, the ANC and Inkatha moved swiftly to contain the political damage.
Well, I am open to meeting all political leaders, including Mr. Butele.
As long as there is killing talk, like is calling us surrogates of the government, I cannot see how we can really accomplish peace. But as far as meeting itself, in principle, I have no problem whatsoever in meeting.
The UN and the Commonwealth have sent observers to try and contain the violence. But the real tragedy is that what leaders say and what their followers do amount to two very different realities. It's not certain that a meeting between Buthelezi and Mandela will douse the flames of Natal, but without a meeting, the likelihood of peace seems as remote as ever. Anne Bothell-Payton, Johannesburg, South Africa, for the CNN World Report.
Recent reports on CNN World Report prompted viewers to write to us about what was presented by the broadcasters in this global news program. A representative of the Indo-American Kashmir Forum objected to a September 6th report from Pakistan on the Kashmiri situation. The genesis of the Kashmir crisis is Pakistan and other Islamic nations like Iran and Saudi Arabia, who are providing the direct financial support and the moral inspiration for the spread of Islamic fundamentalism in Kashmir, India. By airing the Pakistani story about Kashmir, CNN has helped, although quite unwittingly, to spread the madness of Islamic fundamentalism. Another viewer wrote about an October 18th report on efforts to give democracy a foothold in southwestern Africa. He writes, "Democracy does not run smoothly around the world as we can imagine, especially in Zaire. As a Zairean American, I try to get attention from those Americans who believe in democracy to act vigorously toward the American government in pursuing the real and true democratization process in Zaire." Now, CNN World Report is dedicated to presenting news from the perspective of the world's broadcasters, and many of these reports have a very specific point of view. It's the diversity of perspectives among the 135 broadcasters who contribute to CNN World Report that makes the program so unique. We'd like to hear more of your comments. Write to us at CNN World Report, 1 CNN Center, Box 105366, Atlanta, Georgia 30348. And please include your phone number so we can contact you about including your comments in our program.
And when we return to CNN World Report, planting the seeds of success, Ghanaian women invest in their future by taking steps to save the environment.
Each day in this world, 5,000 people become infected with HIV, the virus that causes AIDS. Most of these people had unprotected sex or shared a needle with an infected person. Whether you're gay, straight, or bisexual, always protect yourself. Use a condom every time you have sex, every time. And if you inject drugs, don't share the needle. Don't make it 5001.
Your company's biggest bid, the biggest proposal of your career. Before a power disturbance ruins your future, you need backups. Uninterruptible power supply from APC. Backups gives you instant battery backup power to protect your critical data and a $25,000 insurance policy against surge damage. So don't let power problems pull the plug on your productivity. Join over 1 million satisfied users of backups. APC. Because your business can't stop when your power does.
Wait, don't adjust the color on your TV. These are Florida oranges, and this is as orange as they get. Now, while some people look for oranges that are very, very orange,
Florida oranges are sometimes a little yellow, even a little green. But inside, Florida oranges are rich, ripe, delicious. Outside, this is as orange as it gets. Inside, you can't get more orange.
So get fresh Florida oranges this week at your favorite supermarket.
Make it clear. Make it colorful. Make it both. The DeskJet 550T. With DeskJet printers from Hewlett-Packard, it's easy to make it happen.
It feels as refreshing as it looks. Shower massage from Teledyne Waterpick.
Long live our trees. Long live Mother Earth.
In our environment segment, we focus on Ghana, which recently hosted an international workshop on women and forestry. Traditionally, women in the West African nation take an active role in the environment by farming and gathering firewood. They're also in the forefront of pilot programs to replant trees in forests affected by cutting. Ghana's GBC TV has more on women and forestry.
In the African traditional society, the forest serves as a major source of livelihood for the rural population. Out of the forest comes food, fuel, wool, and medicine, among many other things. In the center of this environment are women who serve as the backbone of the rural economy. The workshop basically provided a forum for women in Ghana and other African countries to critically examine the role and importance of women in forestry. It was jointly organized by the International Tropical Timber Organization, ITTO, the 31st December Women's Movement, and the Forestry Department.
No tree, no life. Plant a tree today and earn money for Ghana. Long live our trees. Long live Mother Earth. When the last tree dies, the last one dies. Evergreen, forest. Our environment is our survivor.
While its immediate objective was to review the state of knowledge on women and forestry in the African context, the workshop also enabled the participants to examine the practical and symbolic importance of forest resources, particularly non-timber products, to rural households. Mr. P.V. Obeng, a member of the ruling Provisional National Defense Council, opened the workshop.
I have no doubt that with your collective commitment, with the support that you are receiving from ITTO and from the Forestry Department, that we can indeed come up with recommendations and perhaps draft blueprints which will be able to sensitize all elements of society and get us to develop the critical mass of commitment and effort which will ensure that we all, men and women, will join hands in confronting the problems facing our forestry.
Ghana's First Lady, Nana Kunedu Ajiman-Rawlings, who is the president of the 31st December Women's Movement, had some thoughts to share.
People are going away with a question in mind, and we want this question to remain with them and also put them into action in their various communities, because it is only when you have an action that you can get a reaction.
Samuel Dazi, Ghana Television, for the CNN World Report.
And coming up in the next half hour of CNN World Report, the geriatric set in Switzerland gets ready to fight back against crime. And underwater treasure surfaces for some explorers from the land down under. And an Icelandic beast is galloping into favor with equestrians.
On Election Day, CNN encourages you to vote and to watch your vote count. Stay with CNN for continuous live coverage beginning Tuesday at 4:30 Eastern.
In 1957, America was on the move, searching for success, for the American dream, for a great-tasting cheeseburger. And we found it at Country Kitchen.
Oh, baby, not the hair.
A lot has changed since then.
Stop in anytime and enjoy your favorite from over 17 different entrees on our farm fresh breakfast menu.
Some things, however, will never change.
Yesterday and today
country kitchen.
Quality. You hear a lot about it, but what does it mean? For more than 60 years, quality at Anderson Erickson has meant one thing. If it's worth doing, it's worth doing right. It shows in using only the finest, freshest ingredients, the highest standards of production, and painstaking testing. Old-fashioned values? You bet. Because the more things change, the more they stay the same. AE. For more than 60 years, quality you can taste.
This is CNN.
And hello, I'm Natalie Allen in Washington. CNN World Report will continue in just a moment. But first, here's a quick look at the top stories on CNN Weekend. Bill Clinton is the front runner in a new poll, but he's campaigning like an underdog. Clinton has nearly lost his voice as a result of days of stumping. He was forced to cut short a speech today in Ohio, but he is vowing to keep making appearances until Tuesday. According to today's CNN USA Today Gallup tracking poll, Clinton's lead over George Bush has widened to 7 points among likely voters. Touring the Great Lakes states, the president described the polls as out of whack and predicted victory. Independent candidate Ross Perot will campaign in California today. He attacked both candidates in speeches yesterday in Florida and Missouri. The shuttle Columbia returned to Earth today after 10 days in space. CNN's Charles Jaco reviews the mission.
The world's oldest usable manned spacecraft glided to a perfect landing Sunday for the 13th time since the Columbia first flew in 1981.
Ignition and liftoff.
From the start, critics have said this mission cost too much.
The problem here is that we're spending a tremendous amount of money on actually launching the space shuttle mission, much more than the value of the cargoes.
Critics claim this mission cost $1 billion. NASA says it's closer to $300 million. The main object was deploying Legios, an Italian mirror-covered satellite.
Legios 2.
Lasers bounced off this disco ball in space can help detect movements of the Earth crust and may help predict earthquakes. But is that worth risking lives when a similar satellite was launched by an unmanned rocket?
We will never launch this vehicle without assuming some risk. If we want to get this great science, we do have to take a certain amount of risk.
Experiments ranged from growing crystals that could help power computers to seeing which types of coatings can withstand long-term space stresses. Astronauts also tested an ultra-sensitive computer and TV system by ejecting and tracking a target into space. The system will help astronauts wrestle space station segments into place.
Every mission that we fly into space takes us one step closer to being able to operate in space and live and work here full time.
But working and living in space means waking up in space,
The Monster Man.
including observing Halloween in orbit, making NASA the world's most expensive clock radio.
Good morning, Columbia. And by the way, there are celebrations in the street of Toronto.
That World Series update for Canadian Steve McLean on his first trip into orbit.
I have talked to about 40 or 50 astronauts, be it over a coffee or over a beer, about what the ascent would be like, what the launch would be like, and not one of them described it very accurately. Everyone said it would be a kick in the pants, but let me tell you, it's a kick in the pants.
NASA says this mission was a step toward getting people onto a space station, back to the moon, and on to Mars. Critics say this step was just too small. Charles Jaco, CNN, reporting.
Our next news summary comes at the top of the hour. Next on CNN World Report, Switzerland's older crowd flexes some muscle in order to fight crime.
Welcome back to CNN World Report, where we bring you the news as reported by the world's broadcasters from their perspectives.
Crime in the streets is rising all over Europe, and it's no surprise that many of the victims are often weak, defenseless, and elderly. But in the Swiss city of Zurich, some senior citizens are beginning to fight back. Swiss TV SRI has this report.
Fear of violent crime has led a growing number of older Swiss to arm themselves.
I need a gun for self-protection. I mean, I feel threatened. There's been a burglary in the house I live in.
That's one way of dealing with the situation. Other members of the retired community prefer to do it another way.
Don't ever think you're lost or helpless. You're not.
You can do a lot to save yourself, but you have to know where your adversary is weak.
This self-defense course is organized by Zurich Sports School. It's geared to the needs of senior citizens and led by 76-year-old Moritz Zimmermann.
When your attacker pulls, simply follow. Like this. She can grip as hard as she wants. I can still get away. And you can too.
I mustn't wait until he gets close. I've got to get ready when I see him coming. And if he approaches from behind, then I have to turn quickly and face him. What you do is go for the face. I wouldn't have thought to pinch his nose and push it up. Or then you can aim for something else that hurts.
The problem Switzerland's elderly face is real. In Zurich, 1/3 of street crimes is against people over 65.
What we set out to do in this course is show seniors that they're not absolutely at the mercy of their attackers. The main benefit is that they come away with the knowledge that they can do something, that they're not helpless.
Senior citizens in Zurich, learning to cope with the mean streets of modern society. This is Mike McMahon of Swiss Television and Swiss Radio International for CNN World Report.
Criminals are also making their way to the popular beaches of Rio de Janeiro, and they're preying on unsuspecting tourists. Brazil's TV Manchetti reports on the government's efforts to solve the problem.
The beach season started this year in Rio de Janeiro with a Black Sunday. 2 weeks ago, people came from all over the city to spend a good time in famous Copacabana and Ipanema. But what was supposed to be a day of pleasure turned into a nightmare. Urban gangs coming from Rio suburbs flocked the beaches. A sudden fight between these gangs gave way to a mass robbery. While people ran in panic, the hooligans stole anything they could, from beach towels to portable radios. It was like a plague of grasshoppers devastating the seashore among growing panic. When the police started to act, the storm was almost over. Some people were injured and very few arrested. Last Sunday, the Rio police took all possible measures to prevent another happening of that kind. Thousands of police officers in uniform and also in disguise occupied the seafront in a huge operation. Never before the Rio beaches were so pleasant and safe. Never before families could enjoy the sea and the sun in such a delightful way. But as summer approaches, there is a concern that gangs coming from the suburbs may strike again. In 2 weeks, Rio will elect a new mayor. The front-runner candidate has already stated that to protect the beaches, he is ready to call federal troops. This is Evie Velder of the Manchetti Television Network reporting to the CNN World Report.
Coming up on CNN World Report, Cuba claims a new election law gives more power to the people.
Has the simple joy of driving become a casualty of the times? Introducing 200 turbocharged horses. Uncanny grace. And one of the safest cars Saab has ever built. The new 9000 CSE. A car you can drive hard with your conscience intact.
You've been hearing a lot of noise about long distance. And while no one takes you to more places than AT&T, did you know this? Place for place, Europe, Asia, South America, everywhere, we give you competitive prices. In fact, the difference between AT&T and other major long-distance companies is no more than a penny. So now that price isn't the real issue, what should you think about? Remember service, quality? Look at the big picture.
Other laser printers have been playing leapfrog for years in a futile effort to catch up with the HP LaserJet. Now they're truly up against it. Hewlett-Packard introduces the HP LaserJet 4, a new generation, a new standard to reach for. Good luck, fellas. If it isn't a LaserJet, it's only a laser printer.
If water leaking through masonry walls is a problem in and around your home, use a paint that stops water. Drylock. My masonry waterproofing paint goes on easy, right from the can, to interior and exterior masonry walls. You see, Drylock penetrates the pores and expands as it dries to become a part of your wall. And it's guaranteed to stop water, even under pressure. But don't just take my word for it. You can see it stop water. Look for this display at a dealer near you.
Today, weeks ago, his critics had written him off, but a sudden surge has Bush gaining ground. Can the Republican momentum continue before time runs out? President George Bush, the guest on Newsmaker Sunday, today, 5:30 p.m. Eastern on CNN.
Cuban President Fidel Castro says a recently approved electoral law falls within the framework of the island's one-party communist system. Direct parliamentary elections are scheduled to be held in Cuba in the next 6 months. Cuba's ICRT has more on the new law.
Havana, October 29, 1992. A new step towards the perfectioning of democracy in Cuba. The parliament approves the new electoral law that complements, regulates, and establishes the procedure that will guide the elections according to the constitutional reforms approved last July. The legislative proposal is also based on popular opinion. In the new law, a substantial change is introduced regarding the nomination of candidates as delegates to the provincial assemblies and deputies to the National Assembly, the top Cuban legislative body, and the way to elect them, which from now on will be by direct and secret vote of the electors. The members of the municipal assemblies will continue to be elected on the basis of candidacies promoted by the neighbors and in neighborhood meetings. The new law also establishes two types of elections: general elections every 5 years for parliament deputies and members of provincial assemblies, and partial elections every 2.5 years for delegates to the latter. The citizens over 16 years of age may vote and be elected in the case of provincial elections, and 18 for parliament deputies. The candidates will be presented jointly at work centers and public meetings so that the electors will get to know them. This law was previously discussed in provincial committees and later analyzed in the 464-member parliament, where more than 50 of them spoke with suggestions for modifications. This debate takes place under economic circumstances that are extremely difficult due to the drastic reduction of the country's import capacity to 25 to 30% of what it was doing hardly 3 years ago, and after the approval of the Torricelli bill that stiffens the economic blockade that the United States has kept against the island for over 30 years. The Parliament approved a declaration condemning the Torricelli bill, while a Dominican delegation invited here called it a jurisdictional monstrosity. On closing the sessions, Cuban President Fidel Castro said, "We have perfected the electoral system without moving away from a single one of our essential principles." The elections will be held at the end of the year for municipal assemblies, followed by others for the provinces and parliament. In Havana and from Cuba Visión, Gilberto Caballero reporting for the CNN World Report.
Israeli Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin marked his first 100 days in office this week, and already he and his wobbly coalition have come under fire. On Saturday, Rabin criticized the progress of the Middle East peace talks. When he first took office, he pledged to accelerate the talks and to reach agreement with the Palestinians within a year. Israel Broadcasting Authority has more on this.
The Rabin government came to power with an entirely fresh agenda. The Prime Minister spoke of new priorities, calling on Arab countries and Palestinians to bury the hatchet and make peace. He gave a special emphasis to education and social issues. The Prime Minister made giant strides in foreign relations. Cutbacks in settlement activity in the territories opened the way to U.S. loan guarantees for immigrant absorption. New policies and quick-fire visits overseas helped change Israel's image in the world to a country open to new options. But conciliatory gestures to the Palestinians, softening up on hardline measures in the territories, backfired. With little development in peace talks, Palestinian extremists turned to increased violence against Israelis and Palestinians, shootings, stabbings, and bomb attacks. The opposition accused Rabin of going soft.
He has not succeeded
in projecting a favorable image and at the same time stand his ground. He has made a lot of concessions. He himself, in fact, in a recent interview said that he felt that all his gestures have been for naught, that he hasn't really received anything in return.
It was the notion of territorial compromise on the Golan which sparked the greatest controversy. Golan residents and opposition parties attacked the government for opening the door too wide to Syria and risking an Israeli withdrawal from the strategic Golan Heights, the site of fierce battles in 2 wars. Thousands protested outside the Knesset as the Rabin government launched a media blitz on the possibility of territorial compromise. The first budget was approved by the cabinet after last-minute changes appeasing the Shas party. The budget boosted funding for education and infrastructure, but made massive cutbacks in housing.
I'm quite worried about the fact that we don't have a Minister of Welfare and Labor, which is an indication that it's not very high on the agenda. And I think that he is too much busy with the peace process, with his coalition, and he doesn't find enough interest in the economy and in welfare issues.
Prime Minister Rabin has learnt the extent of his power and limits. He can initiate change, but only a strong coalition will carry it through. Steve Edwards for IBA News.
And coming up, you don't have to climb the Himalayas to find peace and solitude. A monastery tucked in the mountains of Bulgaria offers spiritual solace, as well as a medieval history lesson. That story and a lot more when CNN World Report continues.
You're looking at a small miracle. It's called an electronic twin-panel sunroof. It's a piece of automotive technology unlike any you've ever seen before. But then, so is this. Introducing the BMW 525i Touring. Lease a BMW 525i Touring for under $500 a month.
When you don't have to send your package overnight, you can save yourself a bundle.
What a difference a day makes.
2-day priority mail service
24 little hours.
from your post office. Send up to 2 pounds in just 2 days for just $2.90. That's right. That's some difference.
What a difference a day makes. We deliver for you.
Other laser printers have been playing leapfrog for years in a futile effort to catch up with the HP LaserJet. Now they're truly up against it. Hewlett-Packard introduces the HP LaserJet 4, a new generation, a new standard to reach for. Good luck, fellas. If it isn't a LaserJet, it's only a laser printer.
Wait, don't adjust the color on your TV. These are Florida oranges, and this is as orange as they get. Now, while some people look for oranges that are very, very orange, Florida oranges are sometimes a little yellow, even a little green. But inside, Florida oranges are rich, ripe, delicious. Outside, this is as orange as it gets. Inside, you can't get more orange. So get fresh Florida oranges this week at your favorite supermarket.
Hollywood loves its blockbusters. But what impact do these films have on society? Are filmmakers sacrificing moral values for profit, morality, and film? Tonight, 9 Eastern on CNN.
In our People and Places segment, we take you to the South Pacific, where a team of international divers has uncovered an ancient treasure from the deep. The cargo of an American shipwreck had been missing for almost 200 years. Now, as Australia's Channel 7 reports, the discovery could prove to be very lucrative.
Australian, Singaporean and Indonesian partners set out to find the wreck of the Ontario, an American clipper that went down in the Karamata Strait between Java and Borneo in 1799. The ship had been owned by the great American statesman and inventor Benjamin Franklin and was carrying tea and porcelain crockery, now worth a fortune.
Immediately above the ballast stones, you had
300 or something pickles of porcelain, which comes to about 22 tons.
Queensland adventurer and shipwreck hunter Paul Martino managed the expedition as divers using high-technology sonar and a remote-controlled mini-submarine scanned the coral reef where the Ontario was holed and sunk. A frustrating week of diving delivered little but clay pots and timber. Then a Perth man whose job it was to record the search on camera made an amazing discovery.
For what reason, I just don't know. I dug a hole and stumbled upon timber and porcelain.
In just 5 to 7 metres of water, well away from the search area, an amateur hit an underwater jackpot.
Yeah, Paul had then told me that I was entitled to a percentage of the overall booty of treasure, which made me very happy.
And what does that mean for you?
Well, depending on how much the entire treasure is worth, it could make me an instant millionaire.
He'd found this incredible booty, beautiful and ornate porcelain from the Qing and Ming dynasties.
Dollar value, very hard to say. Individual pieces could go from $5,000 to $50,000 per piece. The quality of what we are recovering is exceptionally high, so obviously we expect to recoup fairly high prices for it.
Reese Whitby, 7 Nightly News.
Bulgaria boasts many remote monasteries, rich in beauty and history and set in wooded Balkan valleys beneath the snowy peaks. Traditionally, these cloisters have been centers of culture and education where alphabets and books were created, translated, and preserved for centuries. Bulgaria's BT takes a historic look behind the secluded walls of the country's most evocative monastery.
Tucked in the folds of Bulgaria's highest mountain, Rila, the monastery of the same name, has braved time and trouble for some 10 centuries. The hermit monk Ivan, or John, later canonized as Saint John of Rila, retreated to the wilderness in the 10th century, and a monastery was erected at the site of his seclusion. Under Byzantine rule in the 11th and 12th centuries, monasteries became sole educational centers, teaching in Bulgarian, creating books, and preserving the national literary and scholarly heritage. During the heyday of Bulgarian culture, from the 12th to the 14th century, the church played an important social role, and Christian ethics determined the religious character of education in medieval Bulgaria, in contrast to the present.
For some, this is a place on a tourist itinerary. For others, it is a place to seek spiritual solace. For the 8 monks who live here, it is a lifetime commitment to serve God.
That began in 1934 for Father Leonid, who finds moral gratification and the meaning of life in being useful to himself and to believers. He draws strength and peace of mind from his conviction that he is in his rightful place. This is a faith that will soon be shared by a young novice who will continue the traditions that made the monastery school one of few national spiritual strongholds during the Ottoman domination from the 14th through the 19th century. Repeatedly destroyed by fire and looted, the monastery was restored in its present state in the 19th century. The watchtower alone stands as it was originally built in the 14th century by a Bulgarian feudal lord. The Rila Monastery was entered on the UNESCO World Heritage List in 1983. It has one of the richest libraries of old manuscripts and books in the country, with 32,000 volumes, and may be an answer to the eternal question of the secret of life for those who care to listen far from the madding crowd. Ilyana Sherkova, Bulgarian Television, for the CNN World Report.
The North Atlantic island of Iceland could be considered a study in contrasts. This frigid land has more than 200 volcanoes and numerous hot springs. But the former home to the Vikings is also a breeding ground for a sturdy horse that has braved the cold for centuries. Iceland's Channel 2 has more on the Iceland pony.
The Icelandic horse has been an inspiration for poets and songwriters in the past, and it is a unique breed. For centuries, it has remained the same. First because of Iceland's isolation from the outside world, and later because of strict government regulations protecting Iceland's disease-free environment. One might say this strong pony has not changed at all in 1,000 years. It is a hardy, foot-sure horse raised in a harsh nature of a country where only the fittest of animals survive. For at least 900 years, no horses have been imported to Iceland, so these are direct descendants of those of the Viking Age. This Viking horse has become very popular among breeders and riders in Europe, and now breeders in Iceland have been invited to the annual Ekifest at the Santa Anita racetrack in California. Þórarinn Jónasson, a horse farmer in Laxnes, a farm close to the capital Reykjavik, is leading the show.
Yes, I would say it is actually the most popular sport in Iceland. Golf is coming close, but still the horse is number one. It's for the whole family.
The Icelandic horse has been introduced in various parts of the world, and even the stars of Hollywood have fallen for this small but sturdy creature.
First of all, they're very smart. They're very calm, they're very smart, they're sensible. They have spirit, but they're not crazy.
Through centuries, the Icelandic pony has been called the most useful servant on the island, a title of distinction because without the horse, Icelanders would probably not have survived in their rugged and harsh nature. Today, however, it has lost most of its practical use, but the islanders treat it with great respect. There are 90,000 horses in Iceland, but only 260,000 people live here. That means one horse per every 3 individuals. Obviously, the Viking horse has a big fan club here. For CNN World Report, this is Kristín Helga Gunnarsdóttir reporting from Iceland.
And here's a look at some of the stories in the next hour of CNN World Report. Guam fights a losing battle to keep its only garment factory open. A tiny African island works to end years of economic isolation. And a Finnish group mixes it up to give the jazz world a new sound.
On Election Day, CNN encourages you to vote and to watch your vote count. Stay with CNN for continuous live coverage beginning Tuesday at 4:30 Eastern.
His beautiful piano albums have sold in the millions. TV and recording star Floyd Kramer. Now, Heartland Music presents Floyd Kramer in an all-new collection of his most beautiful recordings ever. Floyd has a special piano style that makes every song so warm and relaxing. You'll get 2 beautiful albums. Smooth, easy favorites to today's most beautiful songs. You'll love these all-new recordings. But this special Floyd Kramer collection is not in stores. Please order now.
Order, call toll-free 1-800-257-1257 to save all COD charges and pay only $12.98 for records or cassettes or $16.98 for CD plus $3 shipping. Use your credit card or send check or money order to Floyd Kramer, P.O. Box 8250, Atlanta, Georgia. Remember, save COD charges by sending check or money order or use your credit card.
This is CNN.
Hello, I'm David French in Washington. World Report continues in a minute after a look at some headlines. The candidates are crisscrossing the nation in the final days of the campaign. From California to Connecticut, all three candidates are making last-minute appeals to the voters. President Bush is barnstorming through Michigan at this hour, brimming with confidence over his prospects Tuesday. He plans visits in 3 other states today. In an interview with CNN earlier in Wisconsin, Bush dismissed suggestions that renewed controversy over the Iran-Contra affair will hurt his campaign, and he said he remains confident of victory.
I'm delighted that the campaign will end, and I still feel very confident of victory because I believe the polls have just been totally out of whack, and so I've just driven down on the message, economy, which is better than people have thought, and they're now seeing that. And then I think trust and character. I believe that's why I'm going to win, is people are going to say, look, and they made some mistakes, but we trust him with the major problems of this country, trust him with the crisis if it arises, trust him with our families.
Bill Clinton again is having voice problems, but he's ignoring suggestions from campaign aides that he slow his pace. The Democratic nominee could barely speak at a rally today in Cincinnati, but he was able to raspily urge supporters to continue the fight. He plans a breakneck schedule of rallies in 2 other states today and is set to visit 8 more states by Election Day. His campaign has also bought network television time for an election eve address. Ross Perot plans to speak at a rally in Long Beach, California at this hour. It's one of 2 campaign appearances today in the state with the largest number of electoral votes. And Perot will air 90 minutes of network television commercials this evening. Bill Clinton is climbing in our latest poll, widening the margin over President Bush. The latest CNN USA Today Gallup poll of likely voters shows Clinton with 43%, Bush with 36%, and Perot with 15%. If every registered voter actually votes on Tuesday, the numbers change somewhat, Bush dropping 2 points and Perot gaining 1. Both polls have a margin of error of plus or minus 3 percentage points. Fighting was fierce this morning in Angola's capital city, Luanda. Unofficial reports say at least 100 people are dead, and this latest violence could shatter the 1991 peace accords between the ruling party and the National Union for the total independence of Angola. The fighting began after rebel leader Joseph Savimbi rejected election results which showed his party trailing. We'll be back with more news at the bottom of this hour. Now CNN World Report continues with a look at the troubles of Guam's only manufacturer and the U.S. regulations which are causing trouble for the business.
Welcome back to CNN World Report, where we bring you the news as reported by the world's broadcasters from their perspectives.
2 U.S. territories in the Western Pacific are battling for a share in the manufacture of U.S. goods. It's a trade war between the Pacific Island neighbors of Saipan and Guam. But there is fear in Guam that it's losing out as it struggles to abide by U.S. labor laws. We get more from Guam's KUAM-TV, a new contributor to CNN World Report.
After fighting a losing battle over federal trade restrictions for years, the island's only manufacturer calls it quits. Sagalopac's been churning out 500,000 sweaters a year since 1981, despite increased competition from the Northern Marianas and the Pacific Rim. That era ends December 2nd, when the last stitch is sewn on the last sweater made in the Tamuning factory. After 11 years of shrinking profits, the company's president decided the advantages garment factories had in the CNMI were too formidable.
Saipan has a big advantage of us. Saipan can get any contract workers into Saipan. The contract workers, number one, they are experienced and they are willing to work. Where here in Guam, I cannot get contract workers.
Under the terms of Guam's trade agreement with the United States, Sagalopac would have to pay several $1 million a year in duties on their products if foreign H-2 workers man the machines. Garment factories in the CNMI don't face those restrictions. In fact, Saipan factories are able, under U.S. law, to sew Made in the USA labels onto their garments made by foreign workers. Sagalopac sweaters can't make that claim. So Gerstenlauer pays his employees more than twice the going rate on Saipan, or pays the federal government millions in duties. Either way, he says it's a losing proposition.
This 50,000 dozen at the present time I can buy in Korea, with paying duty and ship it to the United States, for $15 less as it cost me here in Guam.
To make.
To make.
Timewise shut down earlier this year after the federal government tightened import guidelines on watchmakers, meaning when Segalo's doors actually shut, Guam will lose its only manufacturer.
The closure of Segalo means that Guam will no longer be exporting products to the United States. Segalo was the one remaining company operating under Head Note 3A, which is Guam's trade preference with the U.S.
Gerstenlauer also targets problems with an unreliable power authority and the prospects of a $7 an hour minimum wage as additional reasons the plant will close.
The closing of the garment factory has far-reaching implications for this territory. Not only will the 200 people working here lose their